The man who ruined Caterpillar forever. Look at the empty parking lot outside the old Caterpillar plant in Joliet, Illinois. The yellow paint on the gate has faded to the color of old mustard, and the windows are dark. For most of a century, that lot was full before sunrise, packed with the trucks of men who built hydraulic cylinders for machines that move the planet. Today, the fence is chained. The work went somewhere cheaper, and the men who did it were told to take a 20% pay cut or leave. That gate is the receipt for a decision, and a decision has an author. Most people blame the recession, or China, or just bad luck. But there was a man in a corner office in Peoria who signed his name to a strategy, and that strategy is why a Caterpillar machine does not feel the way it used to. His name is Doug Oberhelman, and he ran this company from the summer of 2010 to the end of 2016. This is the story of how the most American machine on Earth got handed to the accountants. Start with what every operator already knows in his hands. You climb into a newer Cat 793 mining truck or a D6 dozer, and something feels lighter, cheaper, more locked down than the iron your father ran. The parts cost more. The dealer holds you hostage on a sensor. The Liebherr crowd will tell you the family in Germany still builds like it means it, and the Komatsu guys will tell you their machine just works for less money. They are not wrong, and Caterpillar knows they are not wrong. That feeling, that slow erosion of the thing that made Cat worth the premium, did not come from nowhere. It came from a boardroom in Illinois that started measuring the company in share price instead of steel. If you want to watch Caterpillar keep losing ground, subscribe to Quisoup. If you are watching on your TV, find Quisoup and hit subscribe there. Before we put it all on one man, we owe you the honest version, because this channel does not sell you fairy tales. No single executive destroys a 100-year-old company by himself. Doug Oberhelman did not invent the disease. He inherited a culture that was already drifting, and he became the clearest face of where it went. To understand him, you have to go back to 2001, to a Caterpillar town hall where the new chief executive, Glenn Barton, brought in 3 men in karate uniforms. On a stage in Peoria, those men broke pieces of wood. Each board was labeled. One said quality. One said cutting costs. One carried a number, $30 billion in revenue, the target Barton wanted the company to hit. That was the launch of Six Sigma at Caterpillar, a management religion borrowed from Motorola and General Electric, and in its first year alone, the company poured more than 300,000 hours of training into it. Now, you have heard people say, Six Sigma killed Caterpillar. Be careful with that, because it is too clean, and clean stories are usually lies. Six Sigma is a tool, and a tool in the right hands cuts waste that should be cut. Barton hit that $30 billion revenue mark in 2004, 2 years early, and the company looked unstoppable. The problem is what the tool teaches you to worship. It teaches you to treat every part of a machine as a cost to be shaved, every variation as a defect, every old engineer who says we always overbuilt that casting for a reason as an obstacle to efficiency. The men who rose under that gospel were not the men who loved the iron. They were the men who loved the spreadsheet. And the man who rose highest was Doug Oberhelman. Oberhelman was not an engineer by training. He came up through the money side, through finance, and through the dealer-facing parts of the business, and he had run Caterpillar Financial. That matters, because the people who used to run this company knew torque and heat treatment, and how a final drive fails in a wet pit. Oberhelman knew capital allocation. When he took the top job in the summer of 2010, he inherited a wounded giant clawing out of the financial crisis, and for a few years it looked like genius. Commodity prices were screaming. The world wanted coal and copper and iron ore, which meant the world wanted mining trucks. So, Oberhelman made the biggest bet of his life. In 2011, Caterpillar bought the mining shovel maker Bucyrus for roughly $8.5 billion, the largest acquisition in company history. He was buying the boom at the very top of the boom. Then came the part that tells you everything about how this new Caterpillar thought. Hungry for more mining exposure in China, Caterpillar bought a Chinese company called ERA Mining Machinery, which owned a maker called Seaway in the city of Zhengzhou. The deal closed in the middle of 2012. By that November, Caterpillar accountants found that the inventory on Seaway's books did not match the inventory actually sitting on the floor. What they uncovered was deliberate, multi-year, coordinated accounting fraud baked into the company before Cat ever showed up. The financial wizards, who were supposed to be the smart money, had been fooled, and the bill came in at roughly $580 million, written off in a single quarter. The men who replaced the engineers could not even read a balance sheet they had paid for. That is the irony that should make you angry. The whole pitch of the finance-first Caterpillar was that disciplined money people would protect shareholders better than a bunch of sentimental machinists in Peoria ever could. Instead, they overpaid for a mining boom that was about to collapse, and they got swindled in China for the price of a small factory. When the commodity cycle finally rolled over, Caterpillar was caught holding all of it. Revenue that had peaked near $66 billion in 2012 cratered toward $38 billion by 2016. The last full year, Oberhelman ran the place. And a finance-trained chief executive has exactly one reflex when the top line falls. He cuts. Quick break before we get into what happened next. If you have been on this channel for a while, watching how Cat lost its way, there is a way to make sure you do not miss what is coming. Join the operator tier for $4.99 a month. You get badges that mark you as a working professional in the comments section, custom emoji to call out the corporate decisions that killed Cat, and you get every video 24 hours before the rest of the internet. To join, open your phone and search Quisoup Membership, or go to the channel page and tap Join. Join the operators and engineers who are paying attention. Now, back to it. The cutting came in waves, and the waves landed on people. The whole language of the company in those years tells you who it was talking to. The earnings calls were about protecting profit per share through the downturn, about managing the trough better than ever before, about disciplined cost takeout. Listen to what is missing from that language. Nothing about the operator in the pit. Nothing about the welder at the giant Caterpillar wheel loader plant near Aurora, Illinois, a site the company had run for close to 60 years. The audience for the modern Caterpillar was the analyst on the call, not the man on the machine. The Aurora plant lost its production to Little Rock, Arkansas, and went up for sale. 800 more jobs converted into a real estate listing. In the fall of 2015, Oberhelman announced a restructuring meant to strip roughly $1.5 billion a year out of the company. The plan put as many as 10,000 jobs on the chopping block and floated the closing or consolidating of more than 20 facilities. And here is the number nobody at the press conference wanted to dwell on. By that point, Caterpillar had already shed more than 31,000 workers since the middle of 2012. 31,000 families, treated as a line on a cost reduction slide. The machine that built America was now being optimized like a snack food brand. The clearest, ugliest example happened back at that Joliet plant, the one with the chained gate. In the spring of 2012, while Caterpillar was posting record profits, the company demanded that the machinists in Joliet swallow a 6-year deal that froze the pay of its veterans and cut real wages by around 20%, while gutting pensions and health care. Nearly 800 workers, members of the Machinists Union, walked out on the 1st of May. They stayed out for about 15 weeks in the Illinois heat. Caterpillar did not blink, because Caterpillar was making money hand over fist and could afford to wait them out. The strikers eventually crawled back under a contract, barely better than the one they had rejected. Cat had proven a point to Wall Street. It would break its own people during a boom to protect a margin. 6 years later, the Joliet plant closed anyway. This is the Boeing pattern, and you have probably said it yourself, without anyone prompting you. A great American engineering company gets taken over by people who think the product is just a vehicle for the stock. Boeing moved its headquarters away from the engineers in Seattle and ended up with the 737 MAX. Caterpillar did the same thing in slow motion. Under the same financial logic, the company eventually walked away from its own promised 3-tower headquarters in Peoria, the river town where the brand was born. The corporate offices drifted first toward Deerfield, outside Chicago, and by 2022, all the way to Irving, Texas, chasing a lower cost of living for a few hundred executives. The wrench-turners stayed in Illinois. The decision-makers moved to a glass tower 1,000 miles from the nearest assembly line. Now layer in the emissions story, because this is where the decontenting hides. Starting in 2014 and 2015, the Environmental Protection Agency phased in the toughest diesel rules ever written for off-road machines, the Tier 4 final standards, demanding that soot and nitrogen oxides fall by roughly 90%. Every manufacturer had to add complex aftertreatment, urea injection, particulate filters, more sensors, more software. The EPA did not tell anyone to build the machine cheaper. But a company run on Six Sigma cost discipline saw all that mandated complexity as a budget to claw back somewhere else. So the castings got lighter, the wiring got more locked down. The diagnostics moved behind dealer-only software, so that the man in the field could no longer clear his own fault code. Komatsu and Liebherr faced the same rules, but they did not have a decade of accountants trained to treat the operator's wrench as a threat to the parts business. That is the real engine of the anger you feel toward modern CAT, and it is fair to ask whether it is even reversible. Oberhelman retired at the end of 2016 and walked away as chairman a few months into 2017, his stock options intact. The strategy did not retire with him. So here is what I want from you in the comments. Was Doug Oberhelman the man who ruined Caterpillar? Or was he just the one honest enough to admit out loud that the company now serves the share price first and the operator second? Tell me in the comments. Be fair to the iron, too. Caterpillar is still enormous, still profitable, still building real machines that move real Earth on every continent. The 793 still hauls. The dealer network is still the widest in the industry. But there is a difference between a company that builds the best machine and charges a premium for it, and a company that builds a good enough machine and uses the parts counter and the dealer software to extract the rest. The first is the Caterpillar your father trusted. The second is the Caterpillar, a finance man optimized. Oberhelman did not wake up wanting to wreck anything. He did exactly what the entire system, the Six Sigma boards, the activist shareholders, the quarterly calls, rewarded him for doing. That is the part that should keep you up at night, because the next guy is being trained to do it again. One more thing before you go. If you really want to be part of the inner circle on this channel, join the site Foreman for $9.99 a month. You get a public shout out in upcoming videos. Your name, your operation, your story, validated in front of the entire Quisoup audience. Plus, everything from the operator tier. To join, open your phone and search Quisoup membership, or go to the channel page and tap join. And remember, the day Caterpillar started measuring itself by its share price instead of its iron was the day it stopped being the company that earned its yellow paint. See you in the next one.